Hi guys, today we're gonna be having a brown food party. So let's get started.
Today, a man who spent nearly 4 decades in prison for a horrible crime he did not commit. On November 8, 1979, at around 11:30 a.m., a black man walked into an antique shop owned and operated by a 39-year-old white woman who will be referred to as B.N. He slowly looked around the store until the woman became suspicious and tried to escort him outside to show him some furniture. Sadly, as she does this, the black man grabbed the woman from behind and hit her over the head with a handgun. He would then bring her to the bathroom located at the back of the store and proceed to sexually assault her. When the man left, B.N. immediately called the police and tried to clean herself with a towel. The police arrived on the scene and collected 3 pubic hairs from the bathroom floor, as well as the towel B.N. used to clean herself with, although this DNA prosecution. B.N. was unsure from the start about the exact identification of the attacker, which is understandable considering she suffered a blow to the head and the assault took place from behind. But she said he was black, about 6 feet tall, in his early 20s, and around 165 pounds. She said that he was wearing blue jeans, a dark windbreaker, and a navy blue watch cap. When asked how he arrived, the woman told police that he had come on a dark orange 10-speed bicycle. Within 10 minutes, the police picked up a black man riding a bicycle that fit the description with his jeans unzipped. But when they brought this man to B.N. and asked her to identify him through the store window, she wasn't able to say with certainty that it was him and they had to let him go. She was then taken to the hospital for a rape kit to be administered. B.N. was shown 3 lineups where she was asked to identify a possible attacker. The first 2 were photographic lineups, and the third was a live lineup. The first lineup was the outcome of B.N. believing she may have seen her attacker on November 30th, 1979. Police investigated the suspect, but when putting his picture in the first photographic lineup, B.N. did not identify him as the attacker or anybody for that matter. With the sexual assault still unsolved and B.N. unable to accurately identify anyone as the attacker, a 20-year-old Malcolm Alexander gets arrested after a woman accuses him of sexually assaulting her. Malcolm was not charged in that incident because he provided proof that the sex was paid for and mutual. Unfortunately, a detective on the case felt like Malcolm fit the description of B.N.'s original attacker, even though he was only 5'9". This then set in motion a chain of events that would lead to Malcolm Alexander spending 38 years in prison for a horrible crime he did not commit. In March of 1980, a Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Department detective asked B.N. to identify an attacker, if there was one, in a second photographic lineup. This lineup included a picture of Malcolm Alexander. B.N. identified Malcolm as the attacker, but said it was tentative, and she was not 100% sure. Only 3 days later, a new detective showed B.N. a live lineup, which also in there and the towel. Neither the defense nor prosecution called for any of that. The prosecution, however, called on both detectives as expert witnesses to describe B.N.'s responses to the photographic pictures. The main detective on the case omitted the original findings in his report that the identification of Alexander was tentative and falsely stated that B.N., without hesitation, identified the photograph of Malcolm Alexander as the man who perpetrated the sexual assault on her. Alexander's defense didn't question nor cross-examine the detectives and their descriptions, and therefore the term tentative was never heard by the jury in relation to B.N.'s identification. When B.N. herself made a statement and identified her attacker as Malcolm Alexander in front of the jury, she too did not use the word tentative. Although Alexander had a stable and steady job as a contractor, his attorney Joseph Koch did not look into his possible alibi and called no witnesses and made a very short closing statement. The police misconduct, the lack of use of DNA evidence, and his corrupt defense attorney, along with many more factors, led to the jury's 56-minute deliberation, which resulted in a unanimous verdict of guilt. Alexander was then sentenced to life in prison without parole. Koch promised the family that he would submit an appeal, but he never did. And by the time the family sought after another lawyer, it was too late and the appeal was denied anyway. Alexander and his family contacted the Innocence Project for help in 1996 after reading an article about DNA testing, but were unable to because of a human error that caused hundreds of boxes of evidence on closed cases to be destroyed in 1984. The only statement from court officials was that this error was never supposed to happen. Alexander kept trying to find ways to prove his innocence, and luck struck him in 2013 when officials were able to recover 3 pubic hairs that were taken as DNA evidence in his case. The Innocence Project then got involved again in 2015, and with the cooperation of the prosecution, the hairs were able to be tested for DNA sometime in 2016. The results of the test proved that Alexander was not the carrier of the pubic hair, and therefore the Innocence Project called for the criminal justice system to vacate Alexander's conviction on January 30th, 2018. Malcolm Alexander's conviction was vacated.
Best part
He was
for
freed from
last.
prison after 38 long years.
Cheers.
Cause number 1, police identification procedure and misconduct. There are so many factors that can lead to a wrongful conviction because it occurs at every level of the criminal justice system. But it always begins with the police because they are the suspect and victim's first encounter with the law when a crime has occurred to or by them. In the case of Malcolm Alexander, the use of a flawed and unreliable identification procedure led to him not only being identified as the attacker, but even being in the lineup in the first place. The police procedures and tactics contaminated BN's memory, and she could not be certain as to what she associated Malcolm Alexander with, whether it be the crime itself or just the previous photographic lineup. But yet, he was charged with sexual assault and taken to trial anyway. During the trial, when the detective was called upon as an expert witness, which we know the jury takes very seriously, he lied and claimed that BN was 100% sure from the start that Malcolm Alexander was in fact the attacker. This was clearly an act of perjury, as the detective just wanted to ensure Alexander's conviction without reasonable doubt. If the detective had told the truth about how tentative her identification really was, there would have been seeds of reasonable doubt which could have changed the jury. Second main cause, legal malpractice. One of the most, if not the most significant cause of Alexander's wrongful conviction was his corrupt and inadequate legal defense attorney, Joseph Koch. Malcolm Alexander paid for his services, and he chose not to make an opening statement, not to cross-examine any of the prosecutor's witnesses, not to call his own witnesses, and did not
Bye,
ask
guys.
for testing
Thanks
and
for
admittance of the
watching.
DNA evidence that was so clearly relevant to the case. He blatantly did not put up a fight for Alexander.
Have you been feeling
in
sad most
order
of the
for
time,
case to come
losing
to a
interest in
swift
things you
close
once cared
so that he
about?
could
You
collect
may be
his
experiencing
paycheck?
these and other symptoms that are
Closing
difficult to
statements
understand.
were
These symptoms are
quick
worth
and brief,
exploring
and
with a
did not
doctor.
question
Learn
the
more about major
description
depressive
that the
disorder and a
detective
potential
gave,
treatment
even
option
though
at
he had copied the report
managingdepression.us.
himself. It was obvious Tosh was negligent in committing legal malpractice, but it wasn't until 1999, when he was permanently disbarred for his legal malpractice, was justice served, even though the damages he caused were incalculable and irreversible for everyone. Main cause number 3, eyewitness identification. Statistics show that 75% of wrongful convictions are due to incorrect eyewitness identification. In the case of Malcolm Alexander, it is evident that it was a significant factor that led to his wrongful conviction. When police initially asked about the attacker, BN claimed she wasn't sure of much because he hit her in the head with a weapon and the assault took place from behind. But she believed him to be 6 feet tall. And there is a major discrepancy between the 9, but somehow BN managed to come to the conclusion that Alexander was the attacker after all. Now, there are many possibilities for this. It could be police intimidation during the identification process, or their tactics of using the same man in repeat lineups, or just a contaminated memory by the victim. It is also proven that many victims who suffer